On a cold October night, while working a late shift at a gas station, a young black woman helped a struggling mother and her baby who didn't have enough money to fill up their tank and get home. But her small act of kindness didn't go unnoticed. A ruthless manager caught her in the act and fired her on the spot, despite her having done nothing wrong. After years of dedication to her job, she walked home unemployed, feeling a hint of regret, but knowing she had done the right thing. What she didn't expect was that fate had other plans. An hour later, a Rolls-Royce Phantom pulled up in front of her home, bringing with it a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, one she never could have dreamed of. Jana Carter had always believed in hard work. At 23, she spent her nights behind the counter of Riverside Gas Station, a small stop just off the highway, working tirelessly to put herself through business school. Unlike her friends who spent their weekends at parties, Jana pulled extra shifts, juggling work and classes with a quiet determination. She had dreams, big ones. One day she would own her own cafe, a place where people weren't just customers but part of a community. But for now, she was content with her night shifts, knowing every truck driver who needed their coffee just right, every nurse rushing in before their graveyard shift, and every factory worker grabbing a quick bite before heading to work. She had learned kindness from her mother, Angela Carter, a woman who had worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Some months had been so tight that Angela counted pennies to put gas in their old sedan, always whispering the same words to her daughter: "Help others when you can, Jana. You never know when you'll be the one in need." Those words had stayed with her, guiding every decision she made, shaping the way she treated people. But times were changing at Riverside. The station had recently been bought out by Falcon Energy, a large corporation that cared about nothing but profits. Donald Whitmore, the new district manager, had wasted no time making that clear. He installed cameras at every angle, watching like a hawk, enforcing policies that left no room for human decency. No freebies, no helping customers, no exceptions. "This is a business, not a charity," he reminded them daily. Jana despised the new rules, but she needed the job. So she kept her head down and did what she could within the limits. It was a cold October night, the kind that seeped through your jacket and into your bones. The station was quiet, save for the occasional car pulling in. Jana was restocking the shelves when she noticed a beat-up Toyota Corolla creeping into the lot, its headlights dim, the engine sputtering like it was on its last breath. Something about it made her pause. The woman behind the wheel looked exhausted, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. As she stepped out, Jana noticed her expensive yet wrinkled clothes out of place in a car that looked ready for the junkyard. But what caught her attention most was the tiny baby sleeping in the back seat, bundled up in a too-thin blanket against the cold. The woman walked in hesitantly, clutching her purse as if it contained the last of her fortune. Jana offered a polite smile. "Good evening, Mom. What can I do for you?" The woman hesitated, then spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. "I need to get to Charleston, but I only have $15. How much gas will that get me?" Jana quickly did the math in her head. $15 wouldn't even get her halfway there. She glanced at the baby again, something twisting in her chest. "How much do you need?" she asked gently. The woman swallowed hard, as if ashamed. $30 would get me home." She let out a shaky breath. "I've tried 3 other stations. No one would help." Jana didn't need to think twice. She had seen this before her mother at a gas station years ago, nervously counting coins, while a young Jana sat in the passenger seat, pretending not to notice. Without hesitation, Jana reached into her pocket, pulled out her wallet, and slid out a crisp $10 bill. "Don't worry about it," she said, her voice firm but kind. "I'll cover the difference." The woman's eyes widened in disbelief. "I can't let you do that." "It's just $10, Jana assured her. "Just pay it forward when you can." For a moment, the woman didn't move, as if the weight of the world had just shifted from her shoulders. Then, her eyes shimmered with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Jana simply nodded, stepping outside to pump the gas herself. As she did, she couldn't help but glance at the sleeping baby, her tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful oblivion. No child should ever feel the weight of their parents' struggles, she thought. She had no idea that in just an hour, her entire world would turn upside down. As Jana finished pumping the gas, she watched the woman carefully adjust the baby's blanket, her fingers trembling slightly as she whispered a quiet thank you once more. Jana simply smiled and waved her off, watching as the beat-up Toyota pulled out of the station and disappeared into the night. She exhaled, feeling a warmth in her chest despite the cold air. It wasn't much, just $10, but it was enough to get a mother and her child home safely. That was all that mattered. But the moment of peace didn't last. The second Jana turned back toward the store, she saw Donald Whitmore standing in the doorway, his arms crossed, eyes dark with anger. He had been watching. Everything. Her stomach tightened as she walked past him, trying to keep her face neutral. Maybe, just maybe, he wouldn't make a big deal out of it. Step into my office. Now, his voice cut through the silence, sharp and ice cold. Jana felt the weight of his words settle in her chest like a stone. She forced herself to stay calm, her mother's voice echoing in her head stand tall. No matter what. She followed him inside, her heartbeat hammering as the door clicked shut behind them. Whitmore didn't sit. He didn't need to. He paced, his hands clenched into fists at his sides. "Do you think I'm stupid, Carter?" He spat, his voice laced with barely contained fury. "Do you think I didn't see what you just did?" Jana kept her back straight. "She had a baby in the car," she said evenly. "She was just trying to get home." Whitmore scoffed, shaking his head. "And that's your problem. Why?" He gestured toward the security monitors on his desk, rewinding the footage to the exact moment she handed the woman the extra $10. "There, right there. You see that? That's theft. Company property. You stole from Falcon Energy." Jana's jaw clenched. "It was my own money." "I don't care whose money it was." Whitmore snapped, slamming his hand on the desk. "You set a precedent. What if everyone started handing out free gas, huh? What if every sob story that walked through those doors expected a handout?" Jana held his gaze. "Not every sob story is a scam." Whitmore's face darkened, his lips curling into a sneer. "You don't get to make that call." "I do. And guess what, Carter? You're fired." The words hit like a slap. Jana felt them sink in, slow and heavy, but she refused to react. She refused to give him the satisfaction of seeing her falter. She took a steady breath, unpinned her name tag, and placed it carefully on his desk. "I understand," she said, her voice calm, controlled. Whitmore smirked. "Oh, don't look so noble. You broke the rules. Actions have consequences. Now clean out your locker and get out." Jana didn't argue. She wouldn't beg. She wouldn't lower herself for a man who saw numbers instead of people. As she walked out of the office, past the rows of bright, sterile shelves, past the familiar faces of customers who had come to know her by name, she felt a strange sense of clarity. Losing her job would make things harder. No doubt about that. Rent, tuition, bills, she'd have to figure something out. But she'd do it her way. And if she had to choose between keeping her job and keeping her humanity, she knew she had made the right decision. Outside, the cold air bit at her skin as she zipped up her jacket and started walking home, the glow of the gas station fading behind her. She had no idea what tomorrow would bring. And she had no idea that, just an hour later, a Rolls-Royce Phantom would be pulling up to her doorstep, about to change everything. Jana sat on the edge of her small, second-hand couch, staring blankly at the textbooks stacked on her rickety coffee table. Her apartment was quiet, save for the faint hum of traffic outside, the occasional car passing by on the wet pavement. The reality of the night's events was still sinking in. Fired. Just like that. 3 years of dedication, of covering extra shifts, of treating customers like more than just transactions wiped away in a single moment because she had chosen to help someone in need. She exhaled slowly, rubbing her temples. The numbers in her head didn't lie. She had enough in her savings to cover rent for another month, maybe 2 if she stretched it. But tuition? Groceries? Bills? She had no backup plan, no safety net. And yet, despite the uncertainty gnawing at the edges of her mind, she felt no regret. Her mother's voice echoed in her memory. "There's never a wrong time to do the right thing." A sharp knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Jana frowned. It was almost 1 in the morning. Who the hell would be knocking at this hour? She stood, heart pounding slightly, and moved cautiously toward the door. Another knock, firm, measured. She hesitated, then peeked through the peephole, and what she saw nearly made her stumble backward. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, sleek, polished, the kind of car that didn't belong in her run-down neighborhood, was parked right outside her building, and standing at her door was the last person she expected to see. Sophia Caldwell. Gone was the tired, desperate woman from earlier that night. Now she stood poised, her shoulders squared, her posture one of quiet confidence. She had changed out of the wrinkled clothes she'd been wearing at the gas station, now dressed in an elegant navy coat, her hair neatly pulled back, but her expression was the same, earnest, grateful, determined. And beside her stood a tall man in an impeccably tailored suit, the kind of man whose presence alone could silence a room. Jana's stomach twisted with uncertainty. Another knock. Knock. Taking a breath, she unlocked the door and pulled it open. Jana Carter. The man's voice was deep, authoritative, yet not unkind. She nodded slowly. Who's asking? He extended a hand. Raymond Caldwell. The name hit like a thunderclap. Jana blinked. Raymond Caldwell. As in Caldwell Enterprises. As in one of the wealthiest and most influential businessmen in the state. Her gaze flickered to Sophia, and suddenly it all made sense: the expensive coat, the perfectly tailored suit, the Rolls-Royce parked at the curb. Sophia Caldwell. As in his daughter. Jana swallowed, gripping the doorframe to keep herself grounded. I don't understand. May we come in? Raymond asked, his tone polite but leaving no room for argument. Jana hesitated. Her apartment was tiny, barely furnished with second-hand furniture she'd collected over the years. The carpet was old, the walls scuffed. And now, standing in her doorway, were two people who probably had entire homes just for their art collections. But she wasn't about to let pride get in the way of answers. Yeah, she said, stepping aside. Come in. The contrast was almost comical. The powerful billionaire and his daughter standing in a living room smaller than the average walk-in closet, surrounded by mismatched chairs and a coffee table she had rescued from a yard sale. Jana wasn't embarrassed, but she was keenly aware of just how different their worlds were. Raymond didn't seem to mind. He took a seat with practiced ease, while Sophia remained standing, shifting slightly on her heels. Jana stayed by the door, arms crossed, her guard up. You're probably wondering why we're here, Raymond began, his gaze steady. That's one way to put it. Sophia stepped forward then, her voice softer than her father's but just as steady. I wanted to say thank you, she said. Not just for the gas, but for not treating me like I was invisible. For helping me when no one else would. Jana shrugged. It was just $10. Sophia smiled slightly. It was more than that. She glanced at her father before looking back at Jana. You didn't know who I was. You had nothing to gain from helping me. And yet you still did. That doesn't happen often. Jana frowned slightly, still not understanding where this was going. I'm glad you made it home safe, but why are you really here? Raymond leaned forward, clasping his hands together. I own Caldwell Enterprises, a multi-billion-dollar company with holdings across industries. One of those industries is gas stations. Jana finished for him, realization dawning. He nodded. Including Riverside Gas Station. Jana inhaled sharply. I was already in the process of acquiring Falcon Energy, he continued. Tonight, I made the final call. As of midnight, I own every single station in the state. Jana barely registered the words. You what? Raymond's expression remained unreadable. I reviewed the security footage. His voice darkened slightly. I saw the way Donald Whitmore treated you. How he fired you over a single act of kindness. Jana felt heat rise to her face. She hated the idea of anyone, especially this man, seeing that humiliating moment. So what? She said carefully. You're here to offer me my job back. Raymond tilted his head, appraising her. Not exactly. Sophia smiled then, stepping closer. He's offering you his job. Jana blinked. What? Raymond's voice was firm. I need someone who understands people, someone who can run that station with both profit and humanity in mind. You've worked there for years. You know the customers, the employees. You know what works and what doesn't. If you want it, the job is yours. full management, salary, benefits. Everything Whitmore had except you'll actually deserve it. Jana stared at him, completely thrown. A job offer was one thing, but this, management, a real salary? She exhaled, still trying to wrap her head around it. Why me? Sophia's gaze softened. Because when no one was watching, when you had everything to lose, you still chose to do the right thing. For the first time that night, Jana felt her composure crack. The weight of the evening, the stress, the uncertainty, it all pressed in at once. She looked down at her worn sneakers, her chipped coffee table, the textbook she wasn't sure she could afford next semester. This was everything she had worked for, a real chance. She looked up at Raymond Caldwell, at Sophia, at the opportunity that had just landed in her tiny apartment at 1 in the morning. And then, finally, she nodded. I'll do it. The morning air was crisp as Jana stepped out of her apartment, her breath curling in the early dawn light. Her first day as the new manager of Riverside Gas Station. It still didn't feel real. Just last night, she had been fired, walking home with nothing but uncertainty, and now she was stepping into a role she had never even considered possible. It wasn't just a job, it was a second chance, a chance to do things differently, to create something better. As she approached the station, she noticed a small crowd gathering near the entrance. Regular customers. Employees. A mix of familiar and unfamiliar faces murmuring amongst themselves. The Falcon Energy sign had already been taken down, replaced with the sleek, modern branding of Caldwell gas stations. It looked different, better, but the real change would start inside. Jana pushed through the glass doors and was immediately met with the stunned expressions of the employees behind the counter. They had seen her leave last night fired, humiliated, and now she was walking back in as their boss. One of them, Devon, a cashier who had worked there almost as long as she had, let out a low whistle. Damn, Jana. When you make a comeback, you don't mess around. Jana smirked, but her voice was steady when she replied. Things are going to be different around here. Just then, the sharp click of dress shoes against tiles signaled the arrival of Donald Whitmore. He strode into the store like he still owned the place, his face twisted in confusion as he took in the new signage, the gathered employees, and finally, Jana standing at the front counter. What the hell is going on? He demanded. Jana didn't move, didn't blink. She owned this moment. You don't work here anymore, she said simply. Whitmore's face turned red. Excuse me. Raymond Caldwell's voice cut through the tension like a blade. You heard her. The crowd parted as Raymond stepped forward, towering over Whitmore with effortless authority. Sophia followed behind, her expression unreadable, but Jana could see the glint of satisfaction in her eyes. Whitmore swallowed hard, his bravado faltering. There must be some mistake. Raymond didn't even blink. The only mistake was allowing someone like you to run this place. You fail to understand the most basic principle of leadership: people matter. You were willing to sacrifice long-term loyalty for short-term profits, and that is not how I do business. Whitmore's mouth opened, then closed. He had no comeback, no defense. Jana let the silence stretch for a moment before stepping forward, her voice calm but unwavering. You fired me for helping someone in need. I'd do it again in a heartbeat. But the difference between us, I still have a job. You don't. Whitmore's jaw clenched, but he knew it was over. Without another word, he turned on his heel and stormed out, the door swinging shut behind him with a finality that sent a wave of quiet satisfaction through the store. The employees looked at Jana, waiting. She exhaled, then turned to face them. All right, she said, let's get to work. The transition wasn't immediate. Change never was. Jana spent the next few weeks learning every detail of the operation from a manager's perspective: the finances, the supply chain, the corporate policies. But more importantly, she focused on the people. She sat with the employees, listened to their frustrations, their ideas, their concerns. She met with regular customers, those who had relied on Riverside not just for gas but as a place where they were known, where they belong. And then she implemented the first real change. It started with a small sign near the register. Pay IT Forward program, help when you can, receive help when you need IT. The idea was simple. Customers who could afford to would leave a little extra money in a designated fund, and those who were short on cash verified cases only. No scams allowed, could discreetly receive what they needed to get home. No questions, no shame. Just help given freely. At first there was skepticism, but then came the first act of generosity. A trucker left $20 in the fund. The next day, an exhausted single mother, running late to pick up her kids, found herself short on gas. The cashier covered the difference, and she left in tears of gratitude. Word spread. More people began contributing not just money, but small gestures of kindness. A cup of coffee for a tired nurse. A meal for a factory worker who forgot his wallet. And then the real test came. A familiar face walked in late one night, a woman in an expensive suit holding a sleeping baby. Sophia Caldwell stood at the counter, looking around at the station she had once entered in desperation. This time she wasn't here for help. She was here to give back. She reached into her designer purse, pulled out her black Amex, and slid it across the counter. "How much is in the Pay It Forward fund?" she asked. Devin, the cashier, checked the ledger. "About 200 right now." Sophia nodded. "Let's make it 1,000. Devin blinked. "You serious?" Sophia smiled. "I've been on the other side of that counter. Trust me, I'm serious." And with that, she walked out, leaving behind a ripple effect that would change more lives than she would ever know. 5 years later, every single Caldwell gas station in the state had adopted the program. Profits were higher than ever, not because people were taking advantage, but because when you build a business that cares about people, people care about your business. Jana had long since outgrown just one station. Now she was the regional director of operations, overseeing every Caldwell station on the East Coast. She had built more than a business, she had built a movement. And in her office, hanging beside her diploma, was a framed receipt for $10 worth of gas. A reminder that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness can change the course of a life. For Jana, it had changed everything. The years had passed in a blur of long days and even longer nights, but standing here now, in the glass-walled office overlooking the city, Jana Carter knew every moment had been worth it. She leaned back in her chair, letting her eyes drift over the framed photos lining the shelves, snapshots of smiling employees, handshakes with community leaders, a group of children in school uniforms funded by one of the many charity programs Caldwell gas stations now supported. But there was one item she never moved from its place, a single framed gas station receipt for $10. The ink had faded, but the message never had. A knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. "Come in." Sophia Caldwell stepped inside, looking as polished as ever, a knowing smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Busy saving the world, Carter?" Jana chuckled, shaking her head. "Just trying to keep up." Sophia sat across from her, crossing one leg over the other. "You know, my father keeps telling me this program was one of the smartest business decisions we ever made. I think it still surprises him sometimes." Jana raised an eyebrow. "That helping people is good for business." Sophia laughed. "Pretty much." Then, her expression turned serious, her gaze flicking toward the framed receipt. "It's funny, isn't it? How one night, one tiny act of kindness can start something this big." Jana nodded, remembering every detail of that night like it had just happened. The cold October air, the desperation in Sophia's eyes, the way her mother's words had guided her without hesitation. "I didn't do it for any of this," she admitted, gesturing toward the office, the company, the success. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." Sophia leaned forward, resting her elbows on the desk, and that's exactly why it worked. The words settled between them like an unspoken agreement. A legacy of change had been built not from corporate policies or sterile boardroom decisions, but from something real, something human. Jana had proven that business could be both profitable and compassionate. That leadership meant standing for something greater than just the bottom line. A soft chime from Jana's phone drew her attention. She glanced at the screen, a message from one of her station managers. Another Pay It Forward success story. A young woman was short on gas to get to a job interview. A trucker covered her fill-up. She got the job. She's stopping by later to say thank you. Jana smiled. It never got old. She looked up at Sophia. "Want to grab some coffee?" Sophia grinned. "I thought you'd never ask." As they stepped out of the office, walking toward the elevator, Jana felt a quiet sense of peace settle over her. She had spent years building something that mattered, something that wouldn't just be remembered but passed on. And as long as people still looked out for each other, as long as kindness still had a place in business, she knew this was only the beginning. Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.